This is the story of how Saint John Bosco found himself in the middle of the woods in pouring rain and set upon by villagers with pitchforks. Let's see how he gets out of it. The Miracles and Prophecies of Saint John Bosco, a project of America Needs Fatima. I'm your host, Matthew Miller. Subscribe for new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. During the first weeks after his ordination, Don Bosco made a round of visits in response to many insistent invitations to express his gratitude to all those who had helped him or merely expressed their goodwill. Don Bosco chose an excellent young man to be a traveling companion. He left early in the morning from Montaldo, where he had lodged with the rector. After a stop to have lunch with the parish priest of Coconato, he resumed his journey and set out for Ponzano, although the hour was already late. Unfortunately, he took a wrong turn and found himself lost in the thick of a forest. The night was approaching. The sky was covered with dense clouds, and a storm seemed imminent. Don Bosco and his companion continued a bit farther down that path, but by night they got disoriented and even lost the trail. The air was lit up only by continuous flashes of lightning, accompanied by thunderous crashes. The two men could no longer see each other, and to top it off, a downpour of rain quickly drenched them from head to toe. The darkness and the thick underbrush made it impossible to continue their journey. What should they do now? They surrendered to their misfortune. Upon finding a place to be somewhat under cover, they sat down to wait for the storm to subside. The loneliness, darkness, lightning, thunder, whistling of the wind, creaking of breaking branches, the mournful moaning of some bird disturbed by sleep, all these things frightened them. The storm's fury made them decide to seek refuge elsewhere. Having recited a prayer to Blessed Mary, Don Bosco stood up and said to his companion, "Let us go in this direction. It must lead someplace." So they did, and after a short walk, they heard the cry of a rooster. The crowing revived them to continue their journey with more confidence. Then, as they advanced, they heard dogs barking and a cat meowing. At last, some light appeared, indicating houses were nearby. "Oh, here's a village!" they happily exclaimed. They hurried on, and the fragrance of baking bread came toward them. Before long, they saw some people gathered around an oven. The two men approached the people, but as soon as the group became aware of their presence, they left everything behind, fled back into the house, and shut themselves up in fear, leaving the visitors in astonishment and dismay. Don Bosco approached the house. "Do not fear," he said. "Come out. We're good people who have lost our way and can hardly stand, soaked by the rain. We mean you no harm. Come and tend to your bread, or it will burn." But it was as if he was speaking to deaf people. They wouldn't listen to reason. After much pleading, they opened the door a little, just enough to be able to look outside. Then some armed men showed up bearing knives, pitchforks, and scythes. Finally, they questioned Don Bosco about who he was and what village he wanted to reach. Don Bosco said, "I'm a poor priest, and this is a friend of mine. We were on our way to Ponzano, but unfortunately we lost our way. We intend you no harm whatsoever." In the meantime, the storm ceased, and many people came around to welcome the strangers. Don Bosco managed to reassure those armed with pitchforks so thoroughly that they returned to the bakery and conversed with him. He asked why they had been so afraid, and they answered that those regions were infested with murderers. On the previous night, some people had been murdered in that same village. They added that the Royal Carabinieri, the policemen, were searching the countryside for the criminals who were still at large. Don Bosco then asked someone to lead them to Ponzano, but the villagers told him he was too far from that destination. So then Don Bosco asked them to lend him and his companion some dry clothes, for he was dripping wet through to the skin. Those good people excused themselves by saying that they were poor. However, they did point him to a wealthy gentleman who lived nearby who could provide the two men with what they needed. Don Bosco asked that they give him a guide because he didn't know that part of the country very well. After hesitating, they rearmed themselves with pitchforks and scythes. Such was their fear of the murderers. Then they set off with Don Bosco and his companion. Taking a narrow path that zigzagged up a hill, they arrived at the foot of a castle overlooking the entire township. The path was sunken between two high hedges. but as they reached the boundary wall, two large mastiffs barked loudly. The party halted, seeing that it was dangerous to advance. But before we finish the story, I'd just like to say that if you'd like to enroll in our Saturday Mass intentions for the promoters of Saint John Bosco, just click on the link I've put in the description below. Loudly, they called the master and announced the arrival of the two lost travelers. The master, an old man by the name of Signore Miolio, was one of those old-fashioned, good-natured types of people, all heart and charity. He came at once, called off the dogs, and ushered Don Bosco and his young friend into the house with a warm welcome. Though the night was already far advanced, he had in his drawing room a gathering of friends with whom he played games to pass the time. Everyone stood up when Don Bosco appeared. The old man invited the priest to sit down and asked who he was. As soon as he learned that the new priest was from Castelnuovo, the old man began to list the friends he knew in that town and its vicinity. The Botagna family, the pastor, and Father Lacqua. The old man was delighted that a priest who knew his friends should have happened to come to his home that night. He quickly provided dry clothing and covered Don Bosco with his cloak. Then he had a good supper prepared to refresh the two men. The old man talked about 1,000 different things and made pleasant conversation. After dinner, Signore Miolio said, "This castle has a chapel. If you favor us tomorrow, we can attend your Mass. You would be giving a great gift to my lady, who professes great devotion to the things of the church." Don Bosco gladly agreed, and around midnight he went to bed. The next day at dawn, the bell announced Mass in the castle, and everyone from the surrounding hamlets flocked to hear it. Don Bosco wanted to resume his journey to Ponzano immediately, but still the good gentleman wouldn't allow him to leave at all. Instead, he led Don Bosco to visit the castle keep, which had such a severe appearance that it put chills down one's back. After touring the outer circle of walls, Don Bosco observed dark tunnels that went into the hill. The master of the castle said, "No one has dared to explore these dungeons, which are very extensive, because thieves, murderers, and perhaps counterfeit coin beaters are certain to have taken refuge there. Some come and go. Now they're here, now they're not. But no man is so brave as to venture in there. Even the carabinieri would not." Inside the castle, among other things, the old man showed him a beautiful library, where Don Bosco asked for a book titled Compendium of Ecclesiastical History by Lorenzo Berti Florentino. The master gladly brought him a copy, and Don Bosco wrote on the last page of it, "The year 1841, October 14th, after having walked several hours in the night along an unfamiliar road, I appeared at the castle of the Merletti near Moncalvo, where I was received and treated with the most generous hospitality by the apothecary Signore Miolio. I obtained this book from him to have a grateful memory of him." Don Bosco always kept this book with him. After a hearty lunch, the good gentleman wanted to accompany Don Bosco and his companion in walking a good stretch of the road to Ponzano. In the account of this adventure, Don Bosco never hinted at any displeasure about the hardships he suffered. All kinds of difficulties became the cause for humorous stories and happy memories for him. Patience and calmness of mind are always the hallmarks of Don Bosco. Thank you all so much for watching. God bless you, and Our Lady keep you.